Longtime Missoula journalist and broadcaster Jim Harmon recently did something he'd never done before. He wrote a book that shines a light on his profession and Missoula's rough and tumble days of the late 1800s. The result? A page-turner that brings our history to life. For years, longtime journalist Jim Harmon has written a weekly column in the Missoula Current called Harmon's Histories. It's proof old reporters never die, they just find new things to write about.
So I needed to find a hobby. So I started looking into old microfilm newspapers at the library and just was bitten. It was so incredible. These stories unfold by journalists in the 1860s, 1870s, and what the subject matter was, their writing style, all that. I just got hooked.
What those old-time reporters or quill drivers often wrote about: murder, prostitution, drugs. Missoula was a rough place in the 1800s with a reputation to match.
In essence, this is the most evil town in Montana. I mean, people were not only being murdered, but all the prostitution on Front Street and associated areas.
The book's called The Sneakinest Man That Ever Was, and that's a title picked by Jim's grandkids. That's a story about Coyote Bill, who prowled the Rattlesnake area. But the book also talks about social events, landmark moments, and the human interest stories of the day.
So my endeavor here was to find real stories. What was it like to pick up a newspaper in 1870 and read about the community, the events, and the people?
Like the story of a group of men who decided to ride their bikes from Missoula to Hamilton on unpaved roads while drinking themselves silly. There's the tale of the kangaroo in St. Regis, even a connection to Jim's own family in the early days of Libby, where his dad and grandfather encountered a character named Duncreek Nell. He read hundreds of old Montana newspaper articles, poring over county records, reading about the days when the city council wasn't that civil. There was dieting advice, shopping, and Missoula's famous fire horses. The stories are delightful and varied and tell history in a way that really lets you imagine what life was like in early Missoula.
It brings history to life. These are wonderful stories that happen to include historical information, but they're stories.
Now, because of the pandemic, Jim couldn't have the usual book readings and signings, so he actually went door to door around Missoula asking businesses if they would carry his book, and so many did. You can find it at Fact and Fiction, Shakespeare and Company, Hometana, the Book Exchange, and at businesses around the Bitterroot. And he has a Facebook page called Harmon's Histories.